to hear from Naperville Police Chief Jason Arres on the facts of how this act affects our community. League member and treasurer Jeff Knezovich will be our moderator tonight, speaking with the chief. We ask you to stay muted during the interview. Please feel free to put questions in the chat, and we will have a Q&A period at the end. Jeff?
Jeff, you're muted.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Naperville, welcome to the December Ideas Forum. The Ideas Forum is designed to identify community leaders who can discuss relevant issues of importance to the citizens of our community. Tonight's program, as Susan said, focuses on the Safety, Accountability, Fairness, and Equity Today Act, commonly known as SAFETY Act. The League of Women Voters encourages the informed and active participation of citizens in government and works to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Any citizen 16 years or older, male or female, may join the League. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan, and it neither supports nor opposes candidates for elected office, but does act on issues after member studies have a consensus. The League of Women Voters has a long-standing of advocacy for open elections and the abolishment of any restrictions that may restrain any registered voter from the proper access to the election process and to polling places. This has been a mainstay of the League since the suffrage movement, and the right for women to vote was granted on August 18, 1920, 102 years ago. Tonight's format will include prepared question and answers by League leadership. Then, as Susan said, the chat room will be open for questions from the general public. Let me introduce our special guest for tonight. Chief of Police Jason Arres began his career at the Naperville Police Department as a patrol officer in 2001. He served as an undercover detective for the Special Enforcement Unit, a detective in the Intelligence Unit, and a member of the Department's Special Response Team, and the ILEAS Region 4 Weapons and Mass Destruction Team. Jason has held the position of Patrol, Canine, and Administrative Sergeant, as well as Patrol and Professional Standards Commander. As a Deputy Chief, he led both the Investigations and Parole Divisions and oversaw Naperville's Public Safety Answering Point, PSAP, Dispatch Center. He was sworn in as Chief of Police for the Naperville Police Department on November 10th of 2021. Chief Arres holds a Bachelor's of Science degree in Mathematics from Northern Illinois University and a Master's degree in Public Safety Administration from Lewis University. He is also a graduate of the FBI National Academy of Quantico, Virginia, and the Northwestern University Center for Public Policy School of Police Staff and Command, and the International Association of Chiefs of Police Leadership in Police Organizations School. We welcome him, and we're happy to have him with us. Our first question directed to the chief is, when will the act go in? Is your department prepared for what possible changes might be ahead of you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and present tonight. So that's a question I get asked a lot, and I think it's worth noting. The act actually went into effect July 1st of 2021. So this bill was signed all the way back in, I've got it, if you see me looking down, it's at my cheat sheet of notes here. February 22nd, it was signed by Governor Pritzker with the effective date to be July 1st of 2021. So there have been, now in that bill, there were different incremental periods for different pieces of the act to take effect. So I think, the bulk of what we'll talk about later on tonight, we'll touch on the detention and cash bail and the citation in lieu of arrest. Those are pieces that are kicking in January 1st, 2023. and have received a lot of the publicity. So again, starting in 2021, many things went into effect, and our department has been working towards that, training to that. And one thing I will say, a lot of what went into effect from a policy and law standpoint, for instance, the banning of chokeholds. I'm in my 22nd year of law enforcement, and I know this predates me. The Naperville Police Department has never authorized chokeholds in our policy. So some of these things that went into effect in law were things that we already were doing here at the police department. The duty to intervene. The best example I give of that is if a police officer is engaging in some type of conduct that is outside of policy or the law while they're on duty. If I am the backup officer that shows up and I do that or see that, I have to intervene and do something. Again, something that has been in the policy since I started here. So there are pieces that were codified into law that this department has had in for as long as time can remember, or as long as I can remember, excuse me.
Chief, you hit on an issue about training. What have you had to implement in order to get the new law up and operating within the city?
So again, we're very blessed as a police department. And I don't say this because I'm the chief or that I've been here for my whole career. Between the community support, the elected official support, the overall city support, and just the great men and women that have worked here, we are ahead of the game when it comes to training. So it hasn't changed a lot of what we have done from a training standpoint. There's a few categories that we have to focus, shift hours that we may have been training in one area towards some of the state mandates. But a lot of those were things we were doing now, and it's really just getting those lesson plans certified through the state. So it's stuff we're doing and stuff we have in place. I'd say the biggest thing that we've done is I did repurpose one position this year because of the heavy lift on our training unit. Our training unit currently is comprised of a commander, a sergeant, and 2 training officers. There is a big need from an administrative and a practical standpoint for another position in that unit. So rather than asking for another police officer in that role, what I was looking for was somebody, potentially retired police or military, to help with the administrative side and then the training side of that. And that was a position that I reclassified here at the police department. And so we'll be adding another position to that unit to assist us in getting that training accomplished.
Did this legislation require additional funding to the police department in the city so you could implement the program? Is it, I guess everybody wants to know from a taxpayer standpoint, is it worth it? So
yes, because that money spent up front to train our people on how to best respond to the multitude of incidents, because obviously most on this call are aware it isn't just crime that we respond to. We go to over 1,000 mental health calls a year on average. So by investing that money in training up front and providing that better service to the community, it prevents, like if we weren't as well trained as we are, we all know that could create liability issues on the back end, which would cost the city a lot more money. So the fact that we're investing that money in training, and we have not had to raise our training budget by that much over the years with the Safety Act, because again, there was such a big investment in training our people appropriately that it hasn't been a big change. We'll get to it later. The body cameras are a little bit of a different story in terms of a cost, but from a training standpoint, it hasn't required a huge change in our budget of what we have budgeted for training.
Chief, you also mentioned that the new program had to be certified by a body. Who is that body and what do they do and why is this required?
So it's the Illinois Law Enforcement and Training Standards Board. They certify all the training. The state has what they call mobile training units, MTUs. The state's divided up into regions. And I know that, well, I know our training plans are good. Imagine all the departments in the state. There's a standard that training is expected to meet. And there's a professional way to put those outlines together, as many of us have done throughout our careers, formalizing that and showing what your training objectives are, what you're going to train your folks on to meet those objectives, and how you're going to carry that through. So the state, the state body, through their mobile training units, certifies those. And that's an accountability for us to make sure that we are delivering the proper training product and what is expected by based on the law and the requirements there.
And does that certification cross all municipalities so that they are, so when I leave Naperville and I go into Downers Grove, I'm going to get the same respect from the police department?
Yes, absolutely. They meet those. So there's X amount of hours per year that we have to have as a police officer to maintain our certification. And that is the minimum standard. So yes, if someone went from Naperville to Downers or Downers to Naperville, when you're certified as a police officer, that certification carries with you. Now, I will mention what I think is a pretty sharp move by the state. If our department puts together, like one of the requirements is high-risk traffic stops. So that was one of the in-service blocks we taught this year per the state mandate. We put our training program together, and what the state governing body is doing is they are cataloging those for any department in the state to look at. So if we want to freshen ours up or just look at how other departments are delivering that, maybe they have a different way to deliver that training. My training unit can go into that catalog and look at what other departments have had certified for high-risk traffic stops and use that. And then on the flip side, again, being the 4th largest department in the state, being as big as we are, we have the benefit of having extra personnel. I get some internal gratitude because we've even gotten thank yous for some of our trainings that we put on. Smaller departments that maybe don't have the infrastructure to do that can also use our training plans to better train our people. And let's face it, in the state, the more police officers we get trained well, it's better for everyone in every community.
During these training sessions, obviously you had exposure with your entire force. Did they find any issue too difficult to resolve in the training, or did everything kind of fall into place for all the police officers?
You're talking about my folks participating in the training?
Right, in the training, was there a hiccup or anything that people said, we can't do this? This is going to be impossible to implement due to the new law?
No, because most of the stuff we're doing already, it's not a huge change to anything we weren't already doing. It's more formalizing it. In the past, we did it because it was the right thing to do. Right now, just the only difference is it's a mandate. Well, we had already internally mandated almost all of this training in Naperville. So it was not a heavy lift or a big change for us philosophically, actually, or any of those things. So it wasn't anything more, it wasn't even a bump in the road for us.
Well, that's good then. It sounds like the force is well prepared for the implementation of this. And with that in mind, since we seem to be ahead of the curve a little bit, how are your force responsive to the implementation or the use of body cameras?
They wanted it sooner than we delivered it. So when we went to the in-car cameras in 2014, that was our first real big step into technology and cameras. And there was some apprehension at that time, the unknown, right? What do we always fear? The unknown. And that's normal for any person. But once they saw the benefits of the in-car cameras, the evidence it captured, showing the great work they're doing out there, they couldn't wait for body cameras to get here. So the body cameras have been great and they've been welcomed by the staff.
Can you tell us what a cost for unit is per officer?
Oh, gosh, I should have written that one down. I'm wearing one, by the way. You just can't see it right now. It's right here on my chest because as a leader, you should lead from the front. So I wear my body camera as well. I will say that I know it's about $440,000 a year for this department to have body cameras. The big bulk of that, and that's body and in-car cameras, the bulk of that relates to the storage. The cameras themselves are not a huge cost, but the contract with our vendor, Axon, which is one of the leaders in the industry, for the storage, because you can imagine the amount of video now that we have, that is where the cost is. And fortunately, we have a great finance department and great leadership in the city and support from the city council that they were able to earmark these funds knowing this was coming to support this initiative.
Yeah, let's talk about that storage. It's obviously a lot of video.
It is.
And you probably capture not only the scene, but people who might be standing around, the general public, etc. What happens to that video? Is it stored? Is it accessible on the World Wide Web? How do we know it's secure as the general public?
Well, it lives in my favorite place, the place I call that mythical cloud that we all hear about. So there are very strict requirements, because that is to pay for the amount of storage and the maintenance that would go for on-prem storage for the body cameras would be extremely astronomical, and from a personnel standpoint, very difficult to maintain. So there are very strict requirements that are set by the government for, we call it CJIS requirements, that any cloud provider has to meet. So knock on wood, because nothing is 100%, but the company Axon, there hasn't been any intrusions to their cloud-based storage system. And they've had a cloud product for a long time. That was a big question we asked of all the vendors that we considered throughout this. So the video does. Now, generally speaking, by law, all videos have to live for 90 days before they can be purged from the system. However, if that video is part of a criminal, civil, or administrative investigation, then it has to be maintained till basically, in the criminal sense, we receive a destruction order from the judge. If we do catch a suspect, otherwise it would be the statute of limitations. So if the case never is resolved, somebody's not caught and is in charge with the crime, it's 18 months for misdemeanors, 3 years for felonies. But if we do catch someone, which we do that quite a bit in Naperville, then that video is held until we receive a destruction order from the judge. The same would apply for civil cases. And then on the administrative side, one of the changes in the law, so you're looking at administrative investigations, citizen complaints, those videos have to be maintained forever, because an officer's personnel file for founded or unfounded complaints, you have to maintain those administrative files for the entirety of that officer's career. That was a lot, so hopefully you caught all that.
Yeah, so with that, there's obviously a lot of video out there, and you're saying after 90 days, most of it's expunged because it's not of any value to anyone. That's probably a good relief valve and something the general public will be happy with, I think. But what about from the standpoint as Joe Blow, citizen Naperville, can I come into your office and say, I want to see some video?
Oh yeah, any member of the public can file a FOIA. And now there's, like anything, there are laws that would restrict that video potentially based on its status in the criminal courts, or if it was an internal investigation. But I think where you're going to go with that next is if you're just you mentioned a passerby, or you're just somebody standing in the crowd. That's where the heavy lift that you hear about for police departments come in. So if somebody does FOIA video, that redaction time that we have to go in and redact video, that is where a lot of time is spent. An employee, we just asked, one of the things I asked for in the budget was another records specialist for our records division, because our records division handles our Freedom of Information Act requests. So there is a lot of time spent in that realm of redaction of faces, license plates. If with this body camera on, I may have your driver's license in my hand, and on a traffic stop. That has to all be redacted. Now the software is very intelligent, but it's still, I want to say it takes over 7 minutes or 8 minutes right now just to redact 1 minute of video. So you can imagine 4 officers and a sergeant, so 5 police personnel at a crime scene with an hour. Imagine, so you have 5 cameras to redact, an hour's worth of video on each. You could see where this becomes very taxing on our records personnel as it relates to FOIAs.
And you do all that at headquarters?
We do.
Wow, very impressive.
Do.
Now, video cameras protect the general public, but how do they protect the police officers from false allegations, etc.?
So, and everybody jumps to that, but do you mind if I jump to other places where it's a great benefit, and we'll jump and we'll go to the allegations?
You're the boss.
I like to operate within the rules, even though I just went outside them a little bit there. I like to say to everyone, because I'm asked all the time, what is the best part about body cameras? It is the best evidence, because when they're working in their technology, and we haven't had glitches, but man, when those things are working, I think back to when I started my career. you become very good at listening to people, jotting notes, recollection, but no human being's mind recalls 100% of what you've heard, seen, what was said. The body cameras, if I'm interviewing a witness, a suspect, a victim, to just be able to go back and watch that when I prepare my police report, or what if I'm walking through a scene and I missed something on there, like, wow, I didn't see that piece of evidence sitting there, or that document, whatever that is, it gets the best evidence. It helps paint a picture of the story, shows everybody what's going on from the perspective of the officer. And just from an evidentiary standpoint, it is fantastic. Going to the allegation side, it holds everyone accountable. I did a research paper for my master's on body cameras. And one of the things that I thought that was really, really neat that I read about is how body cameras can be a natural de-escalator, which is an excellent thing for our folks, because when people start to realize everything they say and do is being recorded, it changes behavior. And I will tell you, I have had people talk to me in ways that you would be shocked that adults talking to other adults, forget that I'm a police officer, would talk to. You would be blown away.
Oh, we've seen them on YouTube videos.
Yes, yes. It just it amazed me the way, you know, being raised to be respectful to everyone, to see how folks like talk to me at times. It was shocking. So when they see a body camera, and I still make traffic stops occasionally. When I go up to a traffic stop, hi, my name's Chief Arres. I stopped you today for this and this, just so you know, everything's being audio and video recorded. Right off the bat, you know, we've publicized that we have body cameras, but I think you just kind of get that whoa factor from people, and it can change behavior. Now, I do like to caution that with, you know, folks under the influence of drugs or alcohol, or if someone is unfortunately in a mental health crisis, it may not de-escalate in those situations, but for many other situations, it can change behavior. So I like that. So then from the accountability standpoint, we do have quite a few false complaints. And I want to say false all the time, because I don't think someone in a lot of cases come in here to lie about what they thought was going on. But police conversations, we're usually not showing up to birthday parties and celebrating. It's generally, hey, you're being held accountable for something. And I'll use a traffic stop. You mentioned that I was the commander of professional standards. Well, for everyone on the call, that's internal affairs. So there were a significant number of times where I would have citizens come in and say, your officer was very rude to me on the traffic stop. And that's where I loved where the in-car cameras came in. And before we watched the video, I would say, can you just describe to me, rude is very general. Can you just give me behaviors that the officer exhibited? And a lot of times it still remained general. Then I'd hit play on the video, and I didn't want to have a biased opinion either. So we watched it together to see if anything would jump out to me. And more times than not, it was like, wow, you know what? I was just really stressed because I was pulled over. I thought he or she said something or acted in a different way. Seeing that now, I guess you're right. I mean, we're not walking up there and giving hugs on traffic stops. We still have to maintain our safety and things like that. But a lot of times the cameras will show, wow, they really weren't rude to me. They really weren't this, that, or the other. And folks sometimes will walk out. And sometimes if there is something we did wrong, well, then it's there. It works on the flip side. Like, here is how you acted on this traffic stop. So there's a mutual, it benefits the officers. It is like an insurance policy for them. If you're acting the way you're supposed to act, we're going to see that. And then the same thing for the public. You know, it's accountability for both sides.
You know, we see on the news accounts from time to time that an officer's camera went on, or he forgot to turn it on, or how does that happen? How do you forget to turn it on if that's a procedure?
So that's an excellent question. I'd say when it's new, and there's some checks and balances that I'll talk about in a second, but in policing, when you go from 0 to 60, not in your car, but where a call, you get a violent domestic call where you hear one spouse is beating the other, there may be a gun involved or a weapon. When these are new, the last thing you're thinking about is your driving lights and siren to that call, thinking about how you're going to tactically approach, knowing that while this situation is one spouse attacking the other, that quickly could turn to you and put you in a situation where now you have to protect somebody's life, but also your own. You're think about all those things that are racing through your brain. And all of us as humans have fight or flight. So think about what police officers have to do. You're running into danger. So your brain is trying to process all these things to think to click down and hit the button twice on the camera, especially when it's a new technology, may not be at the forefront. Or you're driving by a situation and you see a crime in progress and you have to act quickly. That shooting in Lombard last Friday, that unfolded very quickly where the officer, it'll come out where there was gunfire almost instantaneously. The last thing I'm thinking about if that happens to me is let me get my body camera on. I would want it on for the evidentiary purposes, but I'm thinking, how do I protect my own life, the life of others when somebody is trying to end my life at that time? So your brain reaction. Now, the good thing is, excuse me, with the in-car cameras we've added, when we turn our lights and siren on in our cars now, it automatically activates the body cameras for us. Sorry. So it takes the thinking out. A lot of officers are learning their own steps of how to cover that. So if something does quickly happen, they're able to jump out and not think about the body camera being turned on. So they'll turn it on while they're on the way to a call. So there's checks and balances now that we're coming up with, or that they're just learning, like any of us learn a new part of our job on how to best get those activated. Did that help answer your question?
Yes, very good. So hypothetically, I just got stopped by one of your officers because I was using the phone in my car. Is that videoed?
It is. And it sounds like you have a guilty conscience there. Is that true?
It's Christmas. Come on.
Yes. So 100%. I'm telling you, if you see a police officer nowadays, now, if we're giving a presentation, like obviously I do a lot of I'm not recording the presentation, but if we are called to something, chances are the body camera is rolling.
Beautiful.
You're like, what if I'm at city council? I'm not recording the city council meeting.
Well, maybe you should. All right. Well, let's move on to the detention and cash bail area. I know we've spoken offline about that, but there's lots of questions that I understand are not in your privy or your jurisdiction, and probably the state's attorney should have a stab at these questions. But in general, I don't know if you can even answer this question if you want to, but in those states that have similar laws on the books, how has detention and cash bail been received? Is it working in other states? To your knowledge, do you know if police departments are having increased crime from those that aren't incarcerated after a particular issue? What do you know about this whole gambit of detention and cash bail?
So you did hit the nail on the head that this is much more of a state's attorney question, and being the data nerd and the statistical fact nerd that I am, self-admitted, I've heard things, but it's all hearsay from other states. So I don't have the research I did that we were so I should say I am on our vice chair for Illinois Chiefs for the legislative committee. So the one ask that had been given to us to look at when the cash bail changes were proposed were to look at the New Jersey model. And some of my predecessors, I wasn't the vice chair at the time, but on Illinois Chiefs, they were very open to that model because it was more of an objective kind of point-based system based on the seriousness of the crime. And I can speak to, I do have a close friend of mine that is a captain with the New Jersey State Police in the homicide unit. New Jersey was apprehensive about it, but he did say their system works and they don't have cash bail, and it does hold those that they would consider to be a danger to the community or to a person do get held in New Jersey. So that's the one that I probably have the most, and I don't have to know all the nuances of it, but I will tell you that that's me to him firsthand that he feels like it is working in New Jersey.
Who determines if someone's held? Is it you? Is it a committee? Is it just the officer? Or do you bring the state's attorney in on this discussion? How is it determined?
It's the judges. They are the final determination. So let's walk through the process, whether it's now or after January 1st. One of my officers, let's do it for now. One of my officers makes an arrest and it's a felony. One of the
You can
more,
use me as an example with that.
yeah, I'll just use,
Oh.
we arrest John Doe for a felony. We would bring them into Naperville. We would interview them for the crime that we arrested them for. The next step in that is we call the state's attorney's office. We review the facts of the case, and they either approve the felony or whatever charge they think is most appropriate. If the felony is approved, we transport that individual up to the DuPage County Jail, where they would await bond court. And bond court currently is held twice a day. They would go in front of a judge. This is where the state's attorney, now the judicial branch, so to speak, takes over as the owner of this situation. That defendant would go in front of a judge. You would have the state's attorney presenting the facts of the case. That would cover what happened, what we had arrested that person for, and they would also speak to if that subject has any criminal history from the past. The defense attorney would have their chance to speak on behalf of their client and potentially the client speaking as well. And then the judge would make a determination what bail would be from a cash standpoint. And then in most cases, 10% would apply. Now, there are many, many times where a judge will give an I-bond, even for felony cases, depending on what the offense was. So
Tell everybody what an I-bond is.
So an I-bond is personal recognizance. You, John Doe, are being released today. You're promising that you will be at court on your next court date, because that's what cash bail and any bail is really there to say, is you will be at your court date to answer to whatever crime it is you committed. So whether that was monetary or an I-bond, an individual recognizance bond, in today's system, that's how it works. Now, after January 1st, much of that will stay the same. It's just the crimes that a person can be held for will be different. So let me think of something right now. Let's say a felony retail theft occurs after January 1st. That is not a felony offense that would require, in the new law, a person to go to DuPage County and see the judge. We would now handle that much like we did, as I spoke to earlier. We would bring the person into our jail, we would process them, interview them, and then we would give them their complaint/summons that says, this is your court date that you need to show up for, and they're released from our custody at that point. They will not see a judge after January 1st for a crime of that example. Now, quite a few crimes were added after January 1st. That was a big concern, that there weren't enough of the serious offenses in the original version of the Safety Act to hold people. That did have a lot of us concerned. A lot more have been added. They've changed the language up. There was a lot that spoke to just whether the person was a danger to an individual. Well, if you're the victim of a robbery at gunpoint, chances are you may not be re-victimized. But society as a whole should be concerned with someone that just pulled a gun on another individual. And I always tell people a robbery is a 1/4-inch trigger pull away from a homicide. There is concern. Okay, you may no longer be, you probably weren't targeted in that robbery, but that doesn't mean society as a whole shouldn't have some concern until more facts of the case and that person is tried for that crime. Because if you just release them, if they robbed you randomly and they're not held for that crime until that trial, what's to say they won't? And there's a lot of recidivism for that type of crime. That's another thing I've seen. So they've added community as a whole. So the state's attorney in those cases can make a case to the judge that, hey, we think John Doe should be held at a minimum until their first court date, so we can do more assessment and to protect society at large. Whereas the way it was initially written, and this is me kind of paraphrasing what I've learned from our state's attorneys, it was more the individual as opposed to society as a whole, community as a whole.
Is there a number out there that says if I commit a crime, I'm 40%, 60%, 10% more likely to commit a second one?
No, but there are numbers out there that show there is a lot of recidivism with crime. I don't have the exact data in front of me, and I apologize for that. But
no, that's all right. I mean,
there is a lot of recidivism.
Okay. And remember, everybody, in a few minutes, we're going to go to the chat room. So if you have questions, start entering those into the chat area at the bottom of the page. You know, back to the new law. Now, I understand there's a an arbitrary judgment, I guess, of the police officer now. If he wants or she wants just to write a citation, they can do that arbitrarily without calling the commander or the chief of police. How is this going to be monitored?
So I think you're referring to the citation in lieu of arrest. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. That was one, and I will be honest with everyone, that had me extremely concerned. And I'll just give you the example that I've given. Let's say I'll use the business owner right now, that situation. Let's say I own my own business and I have an unruly customer that is being very disruptive and creating a very big scene in my establishment. I'm politely asking them to leave, telling them they're not welcome anymore, and they don't listen. And this happens all the time. Now I call 911. I have some concerns for my safety. I have concerns for my customers, for my business. We show up, and the majority of the time, we can de-escalate the situation and get the individual to leave. One of the tools in our toolbox right now would be if that person doesn't leave, they're guilty of trespassing on that property. If that business owner says, yeah, you know what, they're not leaving for me, they're not leaving for you, yes, I would like to sign a complaint against this person. We have the right to arrest them right now, the ability to arrest that person, because we're not getting, all we really want as police and society is voluntary compliance. That is our goal, voluntary compliance. Well, someone, and again, I wish I could say, I want to say almost 90% of the time we can get people out of there just by good communication with them. But in those situations where we can't, we need that to protect our business owners. Or after January 1st, someone could be in your front yard. Maybe they don't like Chief Arres and what I stand for. And somebody stands in my yard and basically holds a sign that says, we hate the chief. And I want them removed. After January 1st, the police could show up, but until they made this change, we were only going to, if that person cooperated and gave me their ID and they properly identified themselves, the only remedy we had to that was to issue them a citation, and we had to leave. We could not remove them from someone's property, someone's business, anything of that nature. What has been done in the negotiations we've had with the legislators for what is now Trailer Bill 3 is some steps we can get to. So go back to that business scenario that I just spoke about. So after Jan 1, it won't go from de-escalation / negotiation of just trying to get them to voluntarily leave. If we go through those steps and we don't get that voluntary compliance, we now have to write them a citation. If after that citation, and the law, I'm paraphrasing it a little bit here, but it basically says if the behavior doesn't change, because there's more than just trespassing that fits into some of these crimes that I'm talking about. If the behavior doesn't change, law enforcement has the ability to now arrest someone for that. So I did have a very big concern about our ability to protect our homeowners and our business owners for those two quick examples that I gave. But we had some good discussions with our legislators, and they have put that discretion back in our hands in terms of, here's a step we want you to take. They said, we want you to try to give the citation. Once they receive the citation, for the trespass example, see if they leave. If they don't, and the behavior doesn't change, then they can be arrested.
That's a very interesting perspective. What about John Q. Public, who feels he or she has the right of freedom of speech and assembly and wants to be out in front of that business because they ripped him or her off and didn't finish a project, and they're out there telling the general public it's a scam artist? What do you do in a situation like that?
We make sure they're not breaking any laws and they carry on, because if they're on public property, they have that right to assemble and to speak that out. Peaceful protest, just, people being loud and not giving a viewpoint that you or I may disagree with is not a crime. And that is what the First Amendment protects.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I want to thank you for answering the questions from the league. We'll now open up the chat room, and if anybody has a specific question, I think, Susan, you're going to ask those questions.
We did have a question about trespassing, which had been a big issue, but I think that you answered that quite thoroughly. I think people had a concern about that.
Excellent.
What about the Naperville Police Departments or your education about the new laws and how this takes place? Does the state's attorney's office provide that information, or do you have to ferret it out yourself? How does that work?
That's a great question. So we get it from a lot of different perspectives. So for example, I sent a couple of my senior staff members and the training unit today. DuPage County did put on a training about the changes that are going to be implemented after January 1st. Illinois Chiefs is another organization that puts together information for police departments, like a resource center for police departments to use to help us implement it. So yes, it's the state's attorney's office. And then I would be remiss, we are blessed with a phenomenal legal department in-house here at the city of Naperville, led by our city attorney, Mike DeSanto, and his team. So having that luxury in-house, collaborating with our in-house team, both state's attorney's offices, State's Attorney Berlin and State's Attorney Glasgow, and then Illinois Chiefs and other groups, we collate all those, and we're working on it right now. We're going to deliver training in-house just on some of these finer procedural points for our folks, so they can go out there, because that would be the only other thing that I would say is, and we're going to get it done. It would have been nice to have a little bit more time, so we're not scrambling with 2 weeks. The trailer bill, this trailer bill 3 was just signed. I would have loved to have seen them just give us at least 3 months to implement this. Again, I'll say we need some change in cash bail, but now we put changes in effect, and now we got to get, it'd be nice to have some time to implement them. Either way though, we're going to adapt, we're going to overcome, and we're going to get it done.
During the campaign, we heard a lot of rhetoric about the cash bail was going to release violent criminals, rapists, and murderers into public. I have a sense that the judiciary or our judges aren't going to allow that to happen. Is that even a consideration of the new law?
I would really want to defer to our state's attorneys, but I think that is still a point that they're trying to work out, how this law affects pre-2023 cases. So again, the better source are like for our counties, Bob Berlin and Jim Glasgow. But I do believe that is still a point they're trying to figure out is this retroactive, and what does that look like?
Okay.
We do, in fact, have a follow-up on the trespassing question.
All right.
Does a trespasser have to present a danger before an arrest is made, or can the trespasser be arrested for merely being where they don't belong?
No, they don't have to be a danger, because again, let's just use my yard. They may just be standing peacefully in my yard. I guess, I don't know if it's peacefully if I don't want someone on my property, but we all pay for our domains and our property. If they are standing on a public way, there's nothing I can do. But on my property, I do have the right, or any of you have the right to say, okay, yes, you're not screaming, you're not breaking any of the laws, but this is my property and you need to leave my property right now. And if they don't, which you would hope again, we normally get compliance. No, they don't have to be violent. They don't have to be anything. If they don't follow that, if they're issued the ticket and then they don't care and they don't leave, then yes, that property business owner, they can say, yes, I want them arrested, and we can do that.
Cheng Mei, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask your question?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Susan, and thank you, Jason. I do have a question regarding the new law effective January 1st,
Okay.
2023. You mentioned if a person who had the previous record, criminal record, and then committed something, now the policeman arrested him and interviewed him at the station. But because of this new law, the person doesn't have to put any of the cash bail, and then the policeman can only give him a court date, require him to show up. Who decides the date of the court showing up?
Great question. So it's actually the clerk's office for each county, DuPage and Will. They have it, it's digitized. So when we print out that complaint, so when we arrest someone, we fill out a complaint for them. That's just what it's called, and it has the crime or crimes they are being charged with at that point. That generates the court date, just based on the algorithms that the court uses, what courtroom it has to be in, the dates, the times. And so that is automatically generated, and we hand that to that person before they leave our police department.
Okay, thank you. Can I have another question?
Sure.
Okay. So if the person at the court date doesn't show up, now whose responsibility for following up? Will that go back to the police, or is it a state issue?
So the judge on any case, whether it's now or after January 1st, if the person doesn't show up for court, the judge can issue a summons and or a warrant. And then that warrant is put in and attached to that person by name, date of birth, driver's license number. And so if they are pulled over or if they are somewhere and ask for their identification, it's in a database that any officer in the state and actually in the country could see, hey, John Doe has a warrant for failing to appear in court for this crime. They would then take that person into custody, and then that person would be brought in. And my understanding is they would have to be brought to the county that issued the warrant or summons to then go in front of the judge, explain why they didn't go to the original court date. And then that could be a factor that the judge uses to determine if that person needs to be held until their next court date, or if they're just given a new court date and then released again.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the question.
So here's another question. Is there concern on your team that potential perpetrators of certain crimes might now feel more free to carry out their bad deeds?
That's an interesting question. I think so, yes, because I do feel that way. Because that is a lot of what we hear. The media drives things, right? And a lot of what you hear on every side of the equation is less safe this, less safe that, less accountability. True or not, if that message is out there, I do think it emboldens some folks to feel like they can get away with more. I don't have hard data. I will say this, one of the crimes that we've seen more in DuPage County and Naperville has to do with illegal, I'm careful to say, or illegal possession of firearms. So folks that are not lawfully granted the right to carry a firearm, we're catching them, like on traffic stops, people carrying firearms. And some of the things we've heard from suspects is, number one, that they carry it for their safety, but there isn't as much fair repercussions out there. So that's a small sample size. But I do feel like with some of that rhetoric out there, it could make people feel like there's less accountability.
So if people feel like there's less accountability, is there less accountability?
I don't know what to see after January 1st, how this plays out. I don't have quantifiable information to say that, because we're still charging those that commit crimes with crimes. A big part of what is changing is who is held and how they're held, or what's determined to hold them until their trial. Because remember, it doesn't change if that person is found guilty. It doesn't change that they will be accountable and potentially have to spend time in jail for that crime. It's just what happens up until that point that they get their trial and the right to a fair trial that every citizen in this country has. Up until that point, whether they spend that time in jail or not. Because we all know there are cases where someone is found not guilty. So if someone was spending time in jail for a crime they're later found not guilty of, whether that's based on a technicality or not, should they have been in jail for that time? And that's the question that, that's kind of the chicken or the egg type question. Because what we can't forget is there's accountability at the end, whether it's in today's cash bail system or tomorrow's no cash bail system. At the end of the day, if they're found guilty of the crime dependent, because not every crime carries prison sentence to it, there could be prison time at the end of it. So I think that's a key piece. It doesn't mean people aren't going to go to jail if they're found guilty. It's just that initial point up until they are found guilty or not guilty, what happens. Hope that makes sense. I hope I clarified that a little bit.
Yes.
I believe our Zoom assistant has a question if he wants to unmute.
Hi. So first, I'd like to underscore a couple of Chief Arres' points in that a lot of what he's saying is that the Naperville Police Department is leading edge in many ways, and is the Safety Act isn't telling them anything different. So one of the points there is that I was at chat with the chief. I think that before Chief Arres was chief,
Okay.
and it was the first anniversary of the George Floyd killing. And so I was asking, and he's high up still in the police department, what he thought about that. And he told me in detail why everything that police officer did was absolutely against training, as well as telling me what should have been done. So that's just kind of a data point for that. The other one is crisis intervention training, which I think just what that means to everyone is that the Naperville Police Department goes into even dangerous situations like a suicide hostage situation, and they're very patient, and they've been taught, especially when dealing with someone, maybe an adult child or at his parents' house who has medical health issues, mental health issues, that you're doing great on that. And so another data point on that is I spent all my time with cops, that I had coffee with cops and talked to, I think he's kind of your business manager. And I was asking him the hard questions. Well, how come you don't have 100% training on CIT? And he told me exactly what the plan was to achieve that and what the barriers were. So I'm impressed. But now I have a question.
Well, we're at 72%, just so you know, we're almost there. 72% of our officers are CIT trained.
Yeah. And it's making a difference. Lives are being saved.
Huge.
But now I have another question, which is I'm working with the Transportation Advisory Board and the Transportation Engineering Development or Design, TED, on biking. And so we were looking, because there was you issued a press release about a middle schooler who was hit at Coach and Bailey, which is one of the worst intersections there is. But he was hit, and it was a hit and run. It was a hit skip. He was hospitalized. So a friend and I are working on this, and he did some FOIAs. That was never solved. And you probably know that because, well,
I do.
Yes, so that tells me really part of my question is, are you really placing a priority on this? Because we found, just in looking at bicycle accidents, that they were all hit skip.
They were all what? I'm sorry.
Oh, hit and run, hit skip.
Okay. Oh, hit skip. Yeah, it's
So I'm just curious whether you see that as a problem, an increasing problem. And it seems like a really bad thing. And part of it is I just really care about bicycle safety because I've had friends killed. And I was just talking with someone last night that said he quit riding his bike when he got doored, which means opening your door to that. So anyway, that was a long question, but thank you.
no, that is important. And I'll couple your bike safety, right, with I'm a avid runner. And this morning again, I was almost hit in a crosswalk with the walk sign because folks don't stop where they're supposed to stop when they're going to make a right turn. I need to run a GoPro because I'm going to get hit one of these days, and hopefully it won't be bad, but our drivers are so distracted. So we are out there with distracted. I wish we could be everywhere in every corner of this city where things like that happen. But I say it all the time. The best thing about Naperville is I really appreciate all the credit we get for how safe this town is. And we have wonderful men and women that put themselves out there every day to protect all of us in this community. But what makes Naperville safe is all those great men and women working here at the police department, but that partnership with the community and how much the community cares about safety. And that's why every one of us could be a witness to something. And it's like, pay attention, get involved, stick around, help. You know, other folks saw that hit and run happen of that.
Take a
young
picture
Yeah.
of the license plate.
We're so quick to run to our cell phones for everything. Run to your cell phone to take a picture and help us from that accountability standpoint. But we're going to put a big emphasis. We have the Safer Naper campaign that we do where there's themes every month to keep this community safe. So we need to continue to work to raise awareness to bicyclists, and because of my avid running, runners and walkers, because it's we're out there and
cyclists.
People don't pay attention.
Well, we've come to the bewitching hour, so I want to
Oh.
thank Chief Arres for his time, his insight, and good discussion this evening. The League of Women Voters of Naperville, thank you, the viewers, for your involvement in this exercise of democracy. If your questions were not answered tonight, I know the chief has a place on the website, his website. You can send emails to him, and I'm sure he'll be happy to answer your questions directly. And finally, we would like you as a member of the organization, if you're on tonight's discussion group and you're not a member, membership information and applications are available online at our site. Again, thank you everyone for your participation in democracy, and have a good night.
Can I just
Yes.
say, Jeff, thank you for
Thank you,
having me.
Chief Arres.
Oh,
And just
yep.
one more little note.
Yes.
Please join us next month, Wednesday, January 11th, when we will have a panel discussion on how young feminists in our community see their future.
Okay.
And
Chief,
Chief, go
thank you
ahead, you have
very
the final
much.
word.
Thank you, everyone who attended this evening.
Final word, Chief.
I just want to say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. You can see I'm not one that's short for words. I love talking about things. So if you didn't get a question answered, we will have a chat with the chief coming up. Come have a cup of coffee with me. I'd love to sit down and talk to everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays,
Thank
everyone.
you. Good night.
Good night.